Thank you so much. And good evening, everyone. It is such an honor to be here with the University of California, Davis. I'd like to take a little point of privilege to get a shout out to any and all of our NAACP members and to any youth and college division through the California Hawaii Conference that might be attending the university or on this forum tonight. So thank you so much. And I was asked to provide a bit of a frame for you all to consider as relates to moving energy policy in the future or in your research, anything that you do around energy justice and equity, how you can infuse it in all aspects of your work and provide some kind of a grounding. And I first want to indicate that equity means different things to different people in different communities, and therefore it's really recommended that a process is developed that creates a shared understanding. And some of that shared understanding starts with what we call the Hermes principles, which says to be inclusive, have an emphasis on bottom-up organizing, let people speak for themselves, work together in solidarity, build just relationships, and commit to self-transformation. My presentation will be around the examples of environmental injustice and the possibility and ways to create a just transition for communities. And first framing with how the NAACP is working in this space. We have a program that's going on 11 years. It's set to work around environmental injustices, including climate change, that have a disproportionate impact on communities of color and under-resourced communities in the United States and around the world. And it was created to provide resources and support to community leadership in addressing this human and civil rights issue by advocating for three objectives. One is to reduce harmful emissions, particularly greenhouse gases. We combine that action. Our members, they help to shut down coal plants and other toxic facilities at the local level, as well as stopping the building of new toxic facilities like natural gas plants, nuclear, biomass plants. And then they work to advocate to strengthen the development and monitoring and enforcement of these regulations at the federal level, as well as at the local level. And it also includes a focus on corporations, utilities, and making them accountable, and even bigger corporations in conjunction with utilities. We work to advance equitable clean energy, and we work to pass state level campaigns to pass renewable energy and energy efficiency standards, while simultaneously working with local level and small business unions, developing demonstration projects to ensure that communities of color are accessing the revenue generation and opportunities in the new energy economy, while providing safer, more sustainable mechanisms for managing energy for our communities and beyond. And we also work to strengthen the community's resilience and livability. We work to ensure that communities are equipped to engage in sustainability and climate action planning that integrates policies and practices on advancing everything from food justice to advocating for transportation equity and upholding civil and human rights in emergency management and facilitating participatory democratic processes. Now I'd like to tee up, hopefully here, a video that kind of shows the example of environmental injustice. And this video was launched before hashtag We Can't Breathe. sure what happened. Okay, let's see. Apologies, let me go back out and try to put that back up. So sorry.
The city of Baytown is made of old money, lower to middle class families, and pollution. But if you get a job at a chemical plant, you don't have time to think of a solution. I guess my brother, my uncle, and my cousins are sellouts because they went industrial instead of the drug route. Refinery city lights and pipes run along the Gulf Coast. The smoke boasts with sulfur air. It's a wonder anyone's able to take a breath. We're so used to it, we forget. Soon, the sons and daughters won't be able to drink the water. They say the first priority is the people, but the people are the ones being excluded and uprooted. Just ask Archicords, ask George Washington Carver Elementary, or ask the Suburbanites, Exxon Sacrifice, AKA Brownwood Neighborhood. God bless social media, but Flint ain't the only case of complexion without protection. Baytown, AKA the Dirty Bay, is surrounded by giant toxins, threatening the city in every way. We see the huge still from our window sills, make jokes as we choke. We've been possibly dying from this kind of poison oak. It's no mystery that the Black and brown communities are being targeted. Black lives matter, but not when they're expendable and making money is good for the market. Give them a fine, it's fine. They can afford it. We live with the headaches, the shortness of breath, and watery eyes. They keep building, and we pay for it. Constantly trying to heal ourselves and repel the environmental destruction. Breathe it in, then breathe out.
So that again epitomizes the transition that we are in need of. And I always tell a story from my frame as a person that is of African descent, and many others are looking for a just transition. But many people of African descent have been looking for a just transition since the transatlantic slave trade, since our enslavement, since Jim Crow, redlining, and James Crow, our school to prison pipeline. Many of our communities are over-policed, our educational systems under-resourced. We have blighted and dilapidated housing, underemployment, unemployment. We have been the essential workers disproportionately impacted by COVID, Omicron, hosters of polluting systems such as fossil fuel and vehicle emissions, and most disproportionately impacted to the vulnerable impacts of climate change. We are resilient people. We come from being kings, queens, and scholars, and certainly have endured. Now I want to kind of show another video that kind of shows a little bit of the possibility, culturally competent video, as I call it. And it shows, and it's a little dated, but it shows the vision.
The thing about hip hop today is it's smart, it's insightful.
Let hip hop lead the way to a great future.
We could see a much deeper economic downturn. Global warming is real.
Fires have been fueled by a high rate of asthma.
Stated by Katrina.
Were sure to follow, and now they are.
Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment.
Yeah, I.O. make the track sound good. And do that, got a message for the hood. It's time to go green, we gotta go green. The food ain't fresh and the air ain't clean. From the hood to the birds, everybody go scream.
Dr. King, we live in your dream. My president is black, but it's going green. So my president is black, but it's going green. I said my president is black, but it's going green. I got my president back, and I'ma do the same
now
thing.
why your little cousin got asthma? Auntie got cancer. I know you know the problem, but you never knew the answer. You want the answer? Listen to my stanza. When it come to cold, they be stripping like a dancer. Who the company and who the boss like Tony Dancer? Maybe one day we probably get a chance to have a conversation about conservation. He'd rather condemnation, for compensation. Look, I'm from the hood. We need better food and better air. You probably wouldn't never care. You ain't never there. Rappers never rap about it. They rather act hard while these companies doing toxic in my backyard. I'm from the hood. The refinery ain't that far. Something like my neighbor ain't doing me no favors. We need more classes, not more sales. Man, we need green jobs. We don't need no jails. I said it's time to go green. We gotta go green. The food ain't fresh and the air ain't clean. From the hood to the birds, everybody go scream.
Dr. King, we live in your dream. My president is black, but it's going green. So my president is black, but it's going green. I said my president is black, but it's going green. I got my president back, and I'll do the same
put the
thing.
people that most need work with the work that most need done. We need funds, we can harness the sun, we can harness the wind, we can create jobs for my family and friends. Now when I say I'm going green to the hood, it sound funny, but I'm talking about saving the earth and getting money. I'm talking about hundreds, thousands and M's. Do that, go pull up in a hybrid on rims. So when I hit the block, y'all, the song gon' knock y'all. Car on E, but the car won't stop y'all. It's electric, so it's guaranteed to shock y'all. Yeah, I'm going green and I'm straight from the block, y'all. I want the green Bentley, I ain't talking about the paint. I'm talking about the one with biofuel in the tank. So many leaders paved the way for the leaders of today. These are shoulders that we stand on, now we all hands on.
America can create millions of well-paid, green-collar jobs. We can make our streets safer and our communities healthier. We can save the planet for our children and our children's children. That is the promise of a green economy.
It's time to go green, we gotta go green. The food ain't fresh and the air ain't clean. From the hood to the birds, everybody go scream.
Dr. King, we live in your dream. My president is black, but it's going green. So my president is black, but it's going green. I said my president is black, but it's going green. I got my president back, and I'ma do the same thing.
And we will put Americans to work, making our homes and buildings more efficient so that we can save billions of dollars on our energy bills. We need to ultimately make clean, renewable energy the profitable kind of energy. Develop technologies like wind power and solar power, advanced biofuel, and more efficient cars and trucks built right here in America.
So what I basically am sharing or trying to underscore is a framework that the NAACP helped to create along with people's power and movement generation. And it's a strategic framework for a just transition. It's all about resisting, rethinking, and restructuring, stopping the extractive economy and moving into a living economy. It says we need to shift economic control to communities, democratize wealth in the workplace, advance ecological restoration, and drive racial justice and social equity, relocalize most production and consumption, and retain, restore our cultures and traditions. The NAACP just last year, with many of our partners that you see here at the bottom, we created equitable solar policy principles. We spent a very large amount of time being very intentional and creating a shared understanding on what we thought these solar policy principles ought to be. And first, they were about those principles of environmental justice and Jiménez principles that I mentioned earlier. It was about addressing past and current and future impacts of climate change and development in the solar energy policies that move us toward resilient and just transition. And there's 10 of these principles. You can find them on our website. And the purpose is for one to be able to use them with policymakers, use them with corporations, utility companies, as a frame and a way on how we would want to move equitable solar policies. And now we're kind of wanting to change some of the verbiage to just equitable clean energy policies in general. And here pictured is, we have launched solar projects across the nation, as well as powering up clean energy jobs. And here's an initiative that happened in Evansville with the branch there. They identified a Greater St. James Community Center, and there on the right, you see the solar panels on top of this community center. And then to the left are the men that we help train to employ solar or to be a part of the solar industry. Also an aspect of this is that we provided culturally competent training. We connected the community to folks that are working in the realm there, connected them with the unions who had some of the jobs there, and we put it into a community that was called the 4th Ward of Evansville. That was a Black and Brown community. Also looking at entrepreneurship, the NAACP promotes equity through wealth creation and job development and community assets that ensure benefits to all in a racially inclusive manner. Depreciated property values results from the disproportionate placement of toxic facilities in communities of color. It is an economic issue. Substandard housing stock, reliance on public transportation, under insurance, homes, businesses, and health are all economically based vulnerabilities that make African-American communities more vulnerable and less resilient in the face of increasing disasters and climate and so forth. The NAACP also has what we call our Just Energy, Reducing Pollution and Creating Jobs report. And with that, we also have the Lights Out in the Cold report. We're happy to share all of these links. And the NAACP, we call for certain energy-related mandates that our members across the nation advocate for, that we think are equitable and just, and it's not one shoe fits all for every state, but we call for mandatory renewable energy portfolio standards that target at least 25% renewable energy by 2025, and we define that as wind, solar, geothermal, and energy efficiency, no nuclear and no biomass. We also call for energy efficiency standards that requires a minimum of 2% annual retail revenue each year. We call for mandatory net metering policies that allow for solar panel systems of up to 2,000 kilowatts. And we call for mandatory legislation that gives minority and women-owned businesses equitable access to contracts and green jobs and offers a fair chance. And we also call for legislation that allows communities to take advantage of solar energy, whether each individual has solar panels or not. Basically community solar and community-owned solar. This is just an example of kind of our vision around the Black to Green pipeline, powering up, helping formerly incarcerated or returning citizens to be trained in the industry. Here is our chairman of the board and our president of the NAACP on a project in the California area called the Denise Domestic Violence Center, a non-for-profit that helps to prevent violence and intervention organization. We launched a solar project to provide job training to 100 individuals, 20 households and 10 community centers. We partnered with many of the partners that you saw earlier. This Denise installation project, that was supported by a grant, helped to reduce harmful toxins of 90.6 tons of carbon emission. It was equivalent to planting 2,000 trees, taking approximately 17 cars off the road, and a financial savings to the Denise Center estimated to be $48,825.01. And they continue to have a savings on that installation. This is kind of a breakdown of some of the different jobs that are happening that are very fast growing. Energy efficiency has been the fastest growing. Electric vehicles and clean vehicles, obviously renewable energy, solar jobs, and so forth. This is a model with Grid Alternatives, who is out in California and also in Washington, D.C. And they're training workers there in DC. We've partnered with them in other places, and just want to point out that African Americans pay $41 billion to the energy sector, but only hold 1% of the energy jobs. Of course, solar isn't the only industry relevant to the renewable energy sector. In the US, the wind industry, African Americans held about 8% of those jobs. In solar, we hold about 7%, 32% are women. Either way, it's very much below what it should be in the workforce. And then here's a demographic from 2019 showed that the solar industry employed 249,983 workers, and the breakdown by demographics or ethnicity. And I'll just, going back to this, want to just say, imagine placing solar on your homes, placing it in your communities, your faith-based institutions, your schools. And now imagine the local jobs that a person with no transportation can access. Imagine the affordability of electric energy. Imagine how much money that faith institution can save and give back toward their mission. Imagine the funds saved by the school that goes to the children's education, to teachers' salaries like they did in Arkansas, I believe, and so much more, like the reductions of greenhouse gas emissions, and how much more equitable and just the system would be. And just concluding with Julian Bond, who tells about babies are floating down the river. A whole bunch of people started organizing and started pulling the babies out of the river. And one person started running up the hill. The people said, come back. We have to get these babies out of the water. The person says, I'm going to go see who's throwing the babies in the river and make them stop. And so we want to stop all the bad that is happening in the energy realm with all of the racist systems that are occurring, and reimagine new systems. And we want to do that in honor of Martin Luther King Day coming with the fierce urgency of now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Denise, for a very insightful presentation. And I think that we all have a lot to take away from that. So I think we'll start firstly by, well, of course, extending thanks for you sharing your expertise and taking time out of your very busy schedule, firstly, and really being, you know, our first speaker in this series. And I think you started off on a really, really great track. And you presented a lot of interesting ideas that I know that we've touched on in a lot of our ed courses, and, you know, in passing in a lot of discussion in general, especially around DEI. But I think that the spirit of what the egg seminar or this EEI seminar is actually supposed to be, which, you know, energy equity, and not just having that be the footnote or the anecdotal thought, but actually the forefront of the conversation. And so I'd like to start. I think we had first one question in the chat from Walter Williams. It says, he asked, what does 2% retail revenue, or what was on the slide? I'm not sure which slide number we're referring to. So if we could, I don't know if Walter's still here, but if you'd like to maybe pose your question. And we're now opening the space, the floor for any questions in the chat. If you all want to ask any questions, or even open discussion that may not be questions, but maybe some thought pieces. So we'll start there. And if we can go from there, we'll go ahead.
No, this is Walter Williams. I am here. I just wasn't familiar with that terminology, and I've been working in energy for a long time, but wasn't familiar. So, and what that was referring to, what is the 2% of what exactly?
So my understanding is when the light bulbs and all the different things that are sold, sometimes the industry contributes to the utilities, and that revenue can be passed on for energy efficiency programs to various communities, or for whomever's in need of it. And so some states may only provide 0.25% retail revenue on the sales that these industries are obtaining. Some maybe have zero, like Indiana has no mandatory requirement for the industry to contribute at all. But we're saying that at least 2% of the retail revenue should go toward energy efficiency.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Okay, Jess, you can go ahead, and then I'll get to the question in the chat next, okay?
Thank you so much, Denise. It's great to hear from you, and it's great that you're our first, you're kicking off the seminar. I have a question just more from a student's perspective of doing research and kind of wanting to contribute to increasing equity in the green space from a jobs perspective, and also just getting more green energy into communities. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts about action students could take from a research perspective, or just volunteering for grid alternatives, which I've heard their name before in Oakland. They seem like a great organization.
Well, one, we have a youth in college toolkit that has like 10,000 different steps. It can be anything from creating an equitable energy resolution or ordinance that's presented to the city or to the university. It can be anything around getting petitions signed and delivering them to the governor. It can be creating models of energy efficiency like we do at the NAACP. We had a model in Hammond, Indiana, where we just replaced the light bulbs of a health center there. And it was equivalent to taking 19,000 cars off of the highway, and all of that money that they saved just from putting in LED light bulbs, they can then continue to deliver, health services to this, low income Black and Brown community. So the imagination of what students can do are endless. As it relates to research, there's never enough research. There's constant research that's happening. We had a student from a university from out in California that was volunteered to help us, and she did research for one of our units in Ohio on fracking. And actually from injection wells, because they're just really negatively impacted. And so that unit really benefited from her legal realm and her ability to write it up in legislation for them so that they could present it to legislators. In Indiana, which is where I happen to live, we partnered many times with the law school, with various universities to do research at that time around the Clean Power Plan. So anything that's happening at the Department of Energy or the EPA. In fact, I think I saw some recent news around that the EPA kind of has natural gas. I think they have biomass and things like that considered to still be energy source, a good energy source. And so anyone doing research that could help communities to try to influence the US EPA or others that says, these are not good sources of energy and this is why, and something that they could give us comments or something to the US EPA. And many times, and I'll stop, the utility area, the integrated resource planning that takes place where utility companies plan their energy for the next 20 years. Many different stakeholders, different people and communities are beginning to engage in those spaces, and they want to advocate for a just transition, or why clean energy community-owned solar projects should be in their community. And creating an energy democracy frame around that, and so much more. But yeah, we could, the movement, which is what I'm a part of, definitely needs you all's research expertise, your writings, your blogs, everything within this realm.
Thank you so much for that response, Denise. We have one more question in the chat, and then I actually have a question to pose after. So it's the question from Barbara says, are there ways, so of course this one I'm going to have to defer to the EEI a little bit, so because I'm not that well versed in what we're doing behind the scenes, but are there ways that UC Davis EEI may be undertaking efforts in partnership with local NAACP chapters or other community organizations? I leave that to any EEI faculty that may be able to answer that. And if not, if we can't answer that on the spot right now, we definitely will have a more in-depth conversation offline if that's not a possibility right now, given the space. And it seems like that may be ideal. So we'll probably have a more at length conversation offline if that works. It seems like that's
I'm happy to. I'm not aware of any specific activities happening right now, but I think it'd be great to think about ways that we could collaborate more. You know, we were just talking about ways that students could kind of get involved in terms of research and things. And it reminded me, we have a virtual internship and career fair coming up. And if, you know, there are opportunities often for students to find funding on campus or through the EEI. So if there's specific kind of needs in terms of hosting interns to work on specific projects, that might be a good way and a timely way, although coming up soon, to try to get some, you know, more kind of interaction between UC Davis and the NAACP. So that's just an idea off the top of my head, but I'm happy to follow up and talk about some additional opportunities.
Allie, thank you so much.
It could be, I don't know what the local branches are in the area, but it could be the local branch. It could possibly even be the California-Hawaii Conference. Who are doing a lot of things within the clean energy space as well. It's particularly, I think, what all is happening in California around the California Public Utility Commission and net metering and all of that that's happening. The NAACP is involved and keenly aware at the state and local levels.
Yeah, that'd be great to get your input on some people to maybe connect with at the state level that we could look into some further opportunities.
All right, I see we have a question from Christy. If you can go ahead, Christy.
Hi, thank you, first of all, for coming. You talked a little bit about holding corporations accountable. I wanted to know a little bit of, like, what does that process look like, if you could speak to that? And also, do you do any work with these corporations? Like, I guess instead of holding them accountable, like, how cooperative are they? And like, also, what does that look like?
It's a great question. Not privy to say like what corporations, but I will say there are a lot of corporations right now, especially in the realm of racial justice and the awakening of what happened, I guess, an awakening of what happened in January 6th and George Floyd, when George Floyd was murdered, that they have wanted to be of some assistance. Many just want to, you know, provide resources, but many groups are saying, no, we want a more impactful relationship. I always tease, there was at one time where they said corporations are people too. Community wants to have a relationship with these corporations and make them accountable. So creating equity metrics by having an intentional process where the corporation and whoever's working in that corporation and the community that you represent or you know, if you were doing some kind of a pilot program through the university where you have an intentional moment of creating what would equity look like as it relates to their doing things like carbon offsets, and as they're doing things where they want to contribute to making communities more resilient. Many of our communities were opposed to carbon capture and carbon offsets, and because we believe it is a false solution. It doesn't address the root causes. So building a frame with them that, and also a conduit that gets the resources directly to grassrooted communities who are actually the ones that are on the front lines, that need to have the resilience, have the energy, have the jobs, have all of the benefits of this transition, and who have the answers for what their communities need. So creating some kind of a conduit where they are brought to the table and their visions and their ideas, and that there's this collaboration that is occurring, and that is happening in different spaces. Of course, there's always organizations or groups that will just take the funds with no accountability. You know, sometimes that method might be one that can be employed in order for them to make the change. But there is another process in order to not continue to repeat all of the mistakes that we've made in the past. If we really want to change all of these broken systems, then we should be having this rapport with these corporations. And when I say corporations, I'm inclusive also of utilities. You know, we have, I have a couple of hats that I wear, but from Indiana, we have 5 investor-owned utilities. And I'm on all their email streams. I'm in various conversations, various tables, making sure that they know what would be fair and just in their decision making for the next 20 years. Why should a community suffer to 2035 with the coal-fired power plant, things of that nature. So it's creating dialogue, legislation, public advocacy, so much more, and working in concert with others. And your research, your brilliant research that, you know, provides the truth and fact that advocates like myself and others can present and use. It provides a narrative and a source.
Thank you.
Denise, thank you so much for that thoughtful answer. I do have one question I'd like to kind of ask, just especially in the framework of the influx of DEI work, as you say, as a result of the injustices that we've seen time and time again, but really in the forefront with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and the other type. So I'm wondering, what have you found to be the most impactful way that we can cause, or what do you think could be the most impactful way that we can cause or really highlight the importance and cause a mindset shift or perspective shift of the importance of energy equity, especially addressing like energy racism and things of that nature, especially in this framework where the majority are actually benefiting from a broken system and the minority are disenfranchised. So it seems kind of difficult to cause that shift when, by and large, there are a lot of people that are actually benefiting from a broken system. And how I'm wondering what you found to be most impactful in causing that mindset shift.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think the only way I could answer it is I feel like it's a symphony, or you know, you have one group over here that's really holding, which I didn't really lift up, but water, right? Water as a source of energy, and making sure we have clean water and fighting against the pipes and all that. And so it's being in touch with all the different groups that are doing the work. And even when people say nobody's doing the work, there are people that are doing this work. It's being connected and having an understanding and knowing that this group is holding the water realm. This one is in the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission doing this particular work. This group is all into fixed rate charges and affordability of energy. And another group is strictly focused on solar, and this group energy efficiency. And then finding the niche, which challenging for environmental justice or climate justice advocates, is that we're building our capacity and knowledge. And we almost have to be at all of those various tables, right? And we have limited capacity. So finding ways to move that resource so that we can make sure that we're building this at least like-minded pipeline and or black to green pipeline of people, thought leaders, and sounding the alarm on why equity is important. There is no, climate change might be, solutions might be inevitable, but equity is not. And do we really want a society that is exclusive of other people? And I always say that I think we're so much better than that. We say, hey, we found a cure, more or less, or at least a patch for COVID in record time, right? We sent, quote, the man and the woman to the moon. So we know that we can debunk racist systems, inequality, that we're better than this in putting profits before people. So I don't know what to tell you, but it's writing the books, it's speaking the truth to the power, it's doing the research, and it's connecting and making sure that it's moving. And lastly, I'll say, I was with a group of scientists at one point, and that's another, you think, oh, activists and scientists together. But yes, we were all in the same room. And they said, well, we create knowledge for the sake of creating knowledge. Sometimes people never even use our knowledge. And we thought, you have to get your knowledge to the activists, to the people on the ground, so they can put voice to your knowledge so that your knowledge can be implemented and others can benefit. So I hope I answered your question somewhere in there.
No, that was really insightful. I appreciate that. And it really speaks to, resonates with what I think the spirit of the Energy Graduate Group is, which is the program that Jessica and I are part of. And I think that that's one of the major things that we focus on from the energy perspective, is just not having a siloed approach to these energy issues. So it's not just the, material scientists over here, and then the policy people over here. And then, the material science is like, oh, we came up with this cool thing 60 years ago, and the policy people were like, why didn't y'all tell us? This is what we needed. And so really taking that synergistic approach, and of course, that's just a more simplified version, but, coming from different aspects, the policy, the science and technology, even the business aspect, and really aligning all of those in a way that's meaningful to tackle these issues, and understanding that we're approaching rapidly. And honestly, we've been here for a while, but even more so in the forefront now of approaching these issues from a multidisciplinary way. And it needs to have this approach in order to make real progress. And that's what you said really resonated with, I think, the spirit of our program. And it's another reason I love it so much. So thank you so much for that very insightful answer. I don't see any more questions in the chat. I think that we are doing pretty good on time. We're approaching 3 o'clock now. So I'll leave final questions, of maybe a few more awkward seconds of staring on Zoom. Okay, I see we have one. Gary, by all means, go ahead. And then Meg.
Got trapped in another phone call, so I'm a late joiner, and I appreciate people's patience here. But I had put in the comment on our last meeting, I'm kind of in the hunt for specific things that can be done. My background's in business and working with small clean tech, clean energy companies. One thing I know is when I serve on these panels to hand out grant funds for Department of Energy, the Energy Commission in California, and other things like that. Now, commonly, one of the scoring criteria is environmental justice, but nobody knows what to write in that section. So, on a scale of 1 to 5, we tend to give everybody a 3 because they come up with, well, I could build my manufacturing plant in a disadvantaged area and create more jobs, or, if I make cars cleaner, if I have more electric vehicles, well, that'll reduce pollution on the roads that go by all these communities. Sort of non-specific. So I do know that there's this one lever of handing out grant money that almost all granting institutions now, including foundations, say, what are you going to do to contribute to environmental justice? And we need some way to think out, you know, well, what would be a 5 versus a 1? What are people really looking for? That's something that would really redirect people's heads because it's attached to money. The other is my region, obviously around Davis here and Sacramento, is what could we do in our local neighborhood? There aren't any coal plants to shut down, and we shut down most of the big sources of pollution, canning factories, the almond factory in Sacramento, et cetera. But I mean, there are obviously impacted communities, and organizing people around a community energy project where you could take a whole block and try to make everything there better and bring all sorts of technologies in, solar, batteries, energy efficiency, electric vehicles. That seems to get people excited. Maybe in the future we can talk about whether anybody's got any ideas in that area. And then the third is been asked so many times by corporations who now want to get better scores on ESG, which is environment, social justice, and governance. Nobody knows how to score these things anymore, but their shareholders are demanding that they get better scores. So they want to know projects and things that they can do to do better on this. And so I think there's 3 good points of leverage there where you could actually make a difference, where you could actually tie it to something that people are trying to do. But we need some work on trying to actually come up with something specific that can be done. So I'll just throw that out there as a thought maybe we can discuss in the future. But it's sort of the idea of if you can find a good leverage point and you got a pretty good lever, there are ways quantitatively to get things moving in the direction of environmental justice. If we could just help people understand what's good and what's false in terms of what people are actually doing.
I'll just respond with that. I mentioned earlier in my commentary around corporations and groups that are creating these matrices, right, of accountability. But it's not just a quick fix. It's a intentional meetings, like almost 3 times a week. It's folks going to their higher ups and getting approvals and things of that nature, and then coming out with a set of matrices that says, now this is environmental justice as it relates to what this corporation or even a governmental department is doing at the municipal level, state. You can pass these resolutions and ordinances and legislation that can define what that is. And then holding those institutions accountable in those metrics. And also the most important part really is that it's community driven, that it's a democratic process where the people, these decisions aren't just top down, it's everyone collectively moving together on saying, this is what this new system of energy justice should look like.
Yeah, so I can see for the energy graduate group, take what Denise has said, and how do we make a measurable metric? How do we define the metric? How do we score these things? That's a good research project, and maybe a good PhD thesis. I mean, the low carbon fuels standard was essentially born at UC Davis, and now has been adopted by the ARB and state of Washington. Now everybody measures how they are achieving low carbon fuels by using those techniques. What are the techniques to have a metric for high environmental justice? I know one of the researchers in the ITS at Davis, he went on to Argonne, and then he created a model for his PhD, and now that's been adopted nationally as the way to measure on these low carbon fuel standards. What's the equivalent for making progress on environmental justice, so you can tell the difference between a good idea and a not so good idea? It fascinates me, having been a graduate student at Davis, but it goes beyond that.
Yep. Thank you so much, Gary. And I really think that started a really good dialogue that I'm really glad, firstly, we have recorded so we can all kind of go back and really dissect the parts in there that we can take out of and actually turn into actionable items, which I think is important about a lot of these discussions. I think that what you said is very true. Like, we need to really come together at the end of a lot of these, honestly, every discussion, not just around DEI or energy equity, anything of nature, but really come with actionable item plans on how we can move forward and get some of these ideas done. And so I really am glad that you posed those questions and that we were able to start a really good dialogue. And hopefully we can find some fruitful projects out of the suggestions that you stated. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Meg, who's had her hand raised. And then we'll get to some questions in the chat.
Yeah. Thank you, Kabian, and thank you so much, Denise, for taking time to talk to us. Something that we study a lot in our program is this fundamental climate strategy in California of electrifying buildings so that they can be powered by solar or wind instead of fossil fuels. And something that I learned about from other students in EG is this situation where the fossil fuel industry or gas utilities argue against those clean energy policies by saying that they will disproportionately harm communities of color I think mainly by increasing energy prices. But I was just curious what your response to that issue or to that messaging is.
I'm sorry, could you just restate that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries. I think something that we've learned about is, on the one hand, this strategy of kind of transitioning away from fossil fuels by having more electric building appliances and stoves and heating and so on. And then on the other hand, the counter argument that's mainly used by natural gas utilities, that those policies are harmful to communities of color. So if I was wondering if you're aware with those or have to deal with that at all, or how you respond to that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yeah, that happens like all the time where there's these narratives that come out that says solar is unfair to Black people or even elderly people, or that these costs are going to be passed on to the low income and the communities of color. And there's actually an example of us in Indiana where that argument was brought up, and they had organized with group that was like out of a playbook of ALEC and Koch brothers and they constantly have playbooks out there right now. I was just really shocked to hear there's a thing out there called critical energy theory. And as a play, but in any case, and we just came out with our narrative because the NAACP, we have resolutions, we put out reports that any and everyone can use to say that we believe this is good for our communities. And we name all the parts around climate resiliency, the reduction of the energy burden, the job component that would then give some additional relief to that high energy burden, so that we know that clean energy is good for our communities in all ways. And that really it's again, their profits coming before the people. But yeah, definitely a message that EJ communities, civil human rights typically fight against. But they did, galvanize other groups to sign up. I think it was the National Black Mayors Association or some other groups to try to say that, yes, this is unfair to Black people. Then you have other groups that are saying, no, these are all the benefits and why we should move toward clean energy.
Thank you so much for that response. I see you shared the EJ scorecard right after. I'm not sure if that was in response to the last question we had in the chat. So I'll read it, and if we want to expound upon that a little bit more, we can. How can better standards for energy efficiency and installation of rental properties contribute? And how could this be effectively implemented? Denise, you're still muted.
How can better standards for energy efficiency and installation of rental properties contribute? Well, kind of to the response I gave to Margaret, I mean, many times I share about how, and we've collaborated with American Council on Energy Efficiency, a report that they put out showing how so many cities had high populations of high energy burden communities. And it's kind of no surprise to many of us when you think about redlining and, I always say Big Mama, Big Mama lived in this old house, has always been in this old house. Some of them built before 1978. So the weatherization of the house is debunked, and the ability to exchange all those appliances and utilizing rebates and all the kind of wonky things that it takes to be able to make your home energy efficient. I mean, a lot of times some of the utilities will pass out these light bulbs in a shower head, but that's really not going to get it. So that kind of goes back to that question that was asked about that 2% revenue. So if you create or write legislation that says there needs to be a higher percentage of this retail revenue going into energy efficiency programs, and then it helps more low income and communities of color living in old housing stock and unweatherized housing. And many of these same people are the ones that are renting the old house because maybe the more privileged used to live in those big old houses, and then they, moved further out. Now people are moving in and communities are getting gentrified, but that's a whole nother conversation. And they can afford to weatherize the home and everything, but a lot of low-income people are living in older housing. And so yes, the more money that can be generated and creating awareness. I've held events where we did have all the utilities there, we let them pass out light bulbs to the communities, or let the community sign up for energy efficient programs, try to create awareness. That's something you could easily probably do at the college, get the utilities to give you some light bulbs and have some kind of community event to make people aware. And then all of the different social services programs that is it called like Citizen Action that provides energy efficiency or LAHEAP programs and help to get people signed up so that they can benefit, and maybe providing some kind of easy methodologies that people can use, whether it's putting plastic up. I don't know how much energy efficiency issues you're in Northern California area, not sure. So, but whether it's putting the plastics on the window or showing someone how they can caulk their windows, different ways to help people to become, and passing out caulking might even be a thing. I don't know, but yeah, direly needed. And helping people to save, and then there's a whole thing around the grid, right? If we think about what happened in Texas and the grid went down, people were without electricity. How do we ensure that people have the ability to charge up? I imagine your area has problems with wildfires and things like that, making sure wherever that is happening at, that there's these resilience hubs where people can still charge up, and making sure that there's a geographic strategy of where community-owned solar is located, especially within vulnerable communities, so people can still have access to power, all of that, and the transition to electric vehicles. As people are going to be paying for the charging station infrastructures, so much there. So